And I'm live. Yo, what's going on, A2D Nation? Welcome to the Strike Zone tonight. Matt Downing here. And as the Phillies get kicked off, I get kicked off too. So we are in for a good show tonight and hopefully a great Phillies game as well and a great series coming up against the you-know-who, the red-hot, unfortunately also red-hot Atlanta Braves coming into Philly for a 3-game series this week. And we will also be followed by the Mets, who are in absolute shambles later this week, but a big week of Phillies baseball coming up and a big night tonight. So let's get into the rundown for tonight. So Phillies obviously taking on the Braves tonight. We got Ranger Suarez on the mound against Spencer Strider. Looking to be a great matchup. Hopefully we can remind Spencer Strider of what it's like to play in Citizens Bank Park. Even though Reese will not be here to bat spike the bat into oblivion this time, somebody else is going to have to pick up that job. So hopefully the Phillies can have a repeat of that and put the hurt on the Braves tonight. And both Phillies and Braves, two of the hottest teams in baseball right now. So it's going to be a heavyweight matchup and a great series this week. And looking at the Phillies, really the big reason for their turnaround right now, they're starting pitching. I mean, that's been the biggest thing for the Phillies to start this year, how bad they were. But in the past 2 weeks, the Phillies starting pitching has really turned it around. And I'm going to tell you why that Ranger Suarez and Taijuan Walker are the two most important Phillies going forward this season. Because if they pitch well, we can go on win streaks like we are able to do right now. So those guys are absolutely going to be critical. Ranger going tonight, so we'll get into previewing his performance as we get kicked off here tonight. And then with the trade deadline, we're getting very close to the trade deadline. It'll be here before you know it in a couple weeks. Big rumors coming out of the Phillies this week with a former actually reigning at National League MVP this past week. But I'm going to tell you why that maybe the Phillies shouldn't be looking at offense. Pitching is where they need to look, and especially at the top half of the bullpen. That's where the Phillies got to focus on, and I'm going to get into why. And, of course, to finish off this week, my fantasy starts and sits of the week. Great matchups this week. And let's get into tonight. Let's get into the strike zone.
Oh, my God! Oh, embarrassed! He's flying!
Oh, come in. It's almost time.
All right, there we go. What's going on, A2D Nation? And as we get kicked off here, the Phillies are getting squared away right now. That's what I was just checking. Looks like the Phillies are getting going here. Let me see. So we're into the top of the second. All right, well, that's fine. Well, Schwarber actually got a leadoff single. There you go. So that's awesome. But all right, well, at least we got on the board. We got 2 hits so far. So looks like Bryce and Schwarber there getting hits. Unfortunately, JT struck out to end the inning there, but good sign for the Phillies with Schwarber and Bryce once again getting on. And that's kind of been the theme, obviously, with Drew and Schwarber once again. And definitely have to highlight Schwarber there at the top right now. Because I was just watching pregame live right before. And we know how much of a big how much I've criticized the Phillies for putting Schwarber in the leadoff spot. I know it has worked at times. It is working right now. It's just that he's not a prototypical leadoff hitter, especially when we have like 2 on the team that are like absolute bona fide leadoff hitters in Trey Turner and Bryson Stott. But I get why Schwarber's up there right now. In his 16 games so far in June that he got put in the leadoff spot, Schwarber is batting .270 right now with an OPS of 1.061. So obviously, like, for whatever reason, like, we still can't get into why Schwarber does what he does in June. But when you have the hot hand in June, like, that's what you got to do, right? Like, just go with them. And that's what the Phillies are doing right now. And Schwarber is performing. Like, there's no doubt about it. This is what he does in June. Right now in June, he's got 7 home runs right now, 14 RBIs. Like I said, his batting average is 270 in a month. His batting average is up to 187 right now, so he's getting back up near 200. So if Schwarber can continue to hit in the leadoff spot, like if he continues to do this and the Phillies are winning, like, of course, like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like, if the Phillies are going to be winning with him in the leadoff spot, then yes, continue to ride the hot hand until it doesn't work. Which the Phillies, we have seen, like Rob, we have seen Rob get a little creative with the lineup here. throughout the season, especially when Bryce was out and like even when Bryce has come back. We've seen the Phillies go through different lineups so far, but obviously this is probably the most continuity in the lineup that they've had throughout the course of the entire season. Because with Bryce being out in the beginning of the season, and everybody, of course, really struggling the way they were. With, of course, Trey struggling the way he was, and JT struggling. Nick was only the one that was really hitting, and obviously with Bryce and Stott, Alec Boehm had a nice start to the year as well. Brandon Marsh had a really good start to the year. But when you're looking at it now, really the guys that are carrying the team on offense right now are Kyle Schwarber, Nick Castellanos, and Bryce Harper to a degree, because Bryce Harper, he's still getting on base. Like he's still hitting, he's hitting 300 right now. And I know Bryce hasn't really been hitting the home runs, right? Like that's like, we know he's only got 3 home runs right now. Very uncharacteristic for Bryce. But when the guy's still hitting 300 and getting on base the clip that he's getting on, like, obviously, like, I'm not worried about Bryce, like, in terms of, like, there's my phone. We know in terms of, like, his health that, like, he's still not 100%. Like, and even though, like, yes, like, guys before him that have come back, Ohtani, for example, was the one that came back and was still able to hit, when he came back from Tommy John. Even it took him a while before, it took him a little bit to get going. Before they got really, before he started hitting home runs again. And that's what we're starting to see with Bryce here. But as long as Bryce is going to be producing, and he's hitting 300 from the 4-hole right now, like if guys are going to get on for him, Bryce is going to be able to, like, there's nobody that you want in a spot with like 2 outs and a guy on base to try and get a guy in than Bryce Harper. Like, I mean, there's just no guy that can see the ball as well as Bryce Harper does, especially from the 0-2 count. Like there's nobody you want more in that. There's nobody that you want in that spot more than Bryce, right? And the home runs are going to come for Bryce. Like we know that. And I think, and obviously you see that he's, getting the single tonight. Like he's just missing. Like you're seeing, like I've been watching Bryce with like, especially some of the pitches that he's missing. He's very late right now. Like, right. Like on a lot of those fastballs, especially that he likes to drive, especially drive the other way. He's missing right now, but you're still seeing him get to the contact. You're still seeing him, you're still seeing him get hits, and that's why he's batting 300 right now. He's continually getting on base, and he's still continuing to produce, but you're just not seeing him get it at the clip of the power that we're used to. He's not even hitting really a lot of extra base hits right now. A lot of those doubles that he does is he's really legged out. You know what I mean? So it's not like he's tearing the cover off the ball right now. But at the same time, we know Bryce, it's going to be coming soon. And I think with this series right now against the Braves and the Mets coming up, right, this is the week. Like this is the time that Bryce Harper, remember, Bryce completely missed this part of the season last year, right? Remember, that was the thing that he got hurt, right? Got hit on the hand by Blake Snell, who was allowed to have, control issues all of a sudden at that point. So now, looking forward now to this year, going into the hitting season months of June and July and August, where Bryce was not available last year. So that's going to be a big thing. Like that's the biggest thing what I'm looking forward to going into the second half of the season now is like Bryce, like once Bryce does get healthy and like he's not 100% healthy yet, but if he's still producing like this and he's not even 100% healthy, like when Bryce does get 100% healthy, and I don't know how soon that will be, I think it's going to be a lot sooner. I think it's going to be sooner than later at this point, because just the way that Bryce looks and the way that he is hitting he's still hitting at the plate. Like this is the time that Bryce is going to get hot, like as well. Like obviously you're seeing that from Schwarber right now, Nick Castellanos, even though he missed unfortunately the last 2 games due to a stomach bug, but luckily he is back tonight. So that is good to have Nick back in the lineup tonight. That's huge to have him in the 3 holes. So good to see, because we need him for this series against the Braves. This is a must-win series. It's not a must-win series, but when you're looking at it from the perspective of the Phillies, right? Like obviously, okay, now we have pretty much everybody healthy, right? Like Bryce is healthy right now. Nick's back. Like Alec Boehm just came back. He's on a tear since he's come back. Alec Boehm actually, since he's come back right now, that's what I just saw right before. He's been very quiet, Alec Boehm, because we're obviously talking. It's June. Once June comes, Schwarber's name takes over the month. I mean, that's like who you're always going to be talking about with the Phillies in June, right? Schwarber's always going to lead the conversation. But then you get into what Alec Boehm has done since his 7 games since returning from the injured list. He's got 9 hits and 8 RBIs. Alec Boehm, even though he's been on the injured list, he still leads the Phillies in RBIs right now. Like that's the thing. Like even over Nick Castellanos, like Alec Boehm has been a guy very quietly. Obviously the home runs, like Alec Boehm has never been a home run hitter. Obviously, like we know that he's always been a contact hitter, guy that can put the ball to any part of the field, line drive guy. But obviously that injured list stint, I think, kind of really threw off his timing a little bit. And especially you seeing he was struggling a little bit going into that, before he got injured anyway. The home runs weren't really coming. But now that he's come back, he hit one when he came back. And you're seeing that he's producing RBIs. Like Alec Bohm is a guy that you're going to get. You know what you're going to get from Alec Bohm. Like, the guy is going to hit around 300 every year, and he's just going to produce. Like, the guy just hits, and that's like, and the home runs will come for him. Like, obviously I still hold out hope that he can be a 25, 30 home run guy. Like, like kind of like a Jason Worth, like that kind of hitter. Obviously not an outfielder, he's a third baseman, but that's why I still envision like Alec Bohm, like being just the guy that can hit to all parts of the field like that. Obviously, and Jason Worth and, the hair flowing, it's, not a bad comparison, just needs to start growing the beard a little more, Alec. But I think, I don't know if a lot of people would like that. I don't think that would look good, but I can't grow a beard. So I wish I could, but that's all right. So, but yeah, I can't grow a beard like Bryce. I wish I could grow the one like that guy. Jeez Louise. I just get any ounce of that beard, I'll tell you, that's amazing. But yeah, enough from the Phillies facial hair. Talking about the Phillies facial hairs. So getting back into tonight's series against the Braves, right? Like going into tonight, we got Ranger Suarez on the mound, who's arguably probably been our best pitcher over the last month, I would say, especially over his last 3 starts. Coming into tonight's game, Ranger Suarez over his last 3 starts, there we go. 0.9 ERA. Opponents are only batting 220 off him. He's gone 6 innings, 7 innings, and 7 innings in each of those starts. Struck out 18, only 5 walks. So you see, like, Ranger is back to being Ranger right now. Like, Ranger's a guy like I'm not concerned with anymore. Like, obviously, and we have to look at the way that Ranger started the year, right? Like, with the getting to the country late, like, he had problems getting into I think he had like a visa problem or something like that. Or I know he at least was injured to start the year. Going into spring training, got there very late and was hurt to start spring training. So he didn't even get a start in spring training. So basically his spring training was essentially his first 3 starts of the season. And that's the way that Rob Thompson described it. Like, yeah, Ranger, like he basically didn't have, spring training. So, and his spring training basically occurred to start the year when the Phillies were, of course, not doing well. So it was just not a good setup for Ranger to start the year. Very tough circumstances for him. But I mean, just Ranger, the guy always seems, no matter what, the guy always seems to battle back and always seems to, no matter what he's going through, he always comes back, and he's just a guy that you can rely on. Like, Ranger's just a guy that's going to go out there, throw pitches, get guys out. Like, he wants ground ball outs. Like, that's what he wants to do. He wants to get through the game as quick as possible. And that's what you got to love about Ranger. Like, I love the way that he pitches, because and that's why I was just like watching Ricky, like before, like watching what Ricky Patago was saying right before the game. He's like, it was Ranger. Like, the pitch clock don't matter to him. Like, he's just a guy, like, get my like spot, like, just keeps going, likes to be a guy in rhythm. And that's what I love to watch. Like, when Ranger is on like that and he's just going, yeah, he can pretty much go through any lineup. I mean, that's what Ranger can do. I mean, he's really establishing himself. I really hope he can. If he can stay healthy, Ranger can definitely be a number 2 starter for the Phillies. Like, if let's obviously look ahead, right? Like, if Aaron Nola is going to be gone next year, like at the very least, like, with the Phillies are obviously thinking about that. Of course, this thought has entered their minds if Aaron Nola is not going to be here next year, right? Like, the way that Ranger Suarez is pitching right now, and even Taijuan Walker right now as well, but sticking with Ranger first, because Ranger, I believe, has the way more upside. Like, Ranger can be a guy that can be your number 2 starter. Like, I think at this point, like, obviously Wheeler's starting to get, he'll be getting older, and, we'll have to be, he's only got 1 year left, I believe, on his deal. I think he's only got 1 year left. So, that will be another, conversation for another day with Wheeler, the following year. But, like, going into next year, like, the fact that you could still, even like, regardless of what happens with Aaron Nola, say Aaron Nola does leave, but obviously if Aaron Nola is leaving, then somebody will be brought in. Dave Dombrowski is not going to just let Aaron Nola walk and nobody come in. So we know that, like, we know the last couple off seasons, like, so I'm not worried about that. Like, and obviously we can talk about who's going to be available. There are going to be some pitchers available. We all know who the big, we all know who the big guy is, but that's a completely different conversation, because you have to have a separate conversation for Ohtani versus anybody else that would be available in the offseason. Obviously, that's just a completely different conversation. If you're going for that guy, you're going for that guy. So, but, obviously that's that's down the line. But looking ahead with Aaron Nola right now, though, I'm still not expecting the Phillies to do anything with him at the trade deadline. You just are not going to get the return. That's what I was talking about that with actually my dad this week was, after my show last week, we were talking about Aaron Nola, going with the trade deadline. And it's just a matter of looking ahead at that, right? Like Aaron Nola, he at least for all of his faults, for all of the, problems and all the complaining we do about Aaron Nola is a guy that does not get hurt, stays healthy, and pitches a lot of innings. And right now in MLB, if you're a guy that can go around 200 innings in a season, you can't get that from many guys in the league right now with the amount that guys are on innings limits and pitch limits. But when you have a guy that can give you that amount of innings for the price that he's at right now, the Phillies are going to have to get a massive return for Aaron Nola. And right now, looking at this year, the Phillies are trying to win the World Series. We're back into it now. We're going to be buyers at the deadline. There's no question about that. So we're still World Series or bust. That's our expectation, as it should be every single season with the team that we have. But looking ahead at the deadline with Aaron Nola, you're not going to get the odds of getting the return for this season. Obviously, the move for Aaron Nola is about this, not only about the future, but it has to be about this year too, because the Phillies are a team that is trying to win the World Series right now. And if you're going to offload, a pitcher like Aaron Nola, then you better at least be getting two pitchers that can at least equate for the amount of innings that he's going to be producing at that level, which, let's face it, the Phillies are not going to get for this season. They might want to, prospect wise, but that's down the line, and that's, there's no guarantee with that. Phillies are going to want proven guys in a trade for Aaron Nola. There's just no doubt about it. Hey, what's going on, Timothy? How you doing, bud? That's a good point too, right? So Paul Goldschmidt, right? That's the guy that we were, on WIP this week. That was floated around that the Phillies have been connected to the Cardinals, and looking at the Cardinals right now, the way that they have gone, that it's gone for them this season, last place right now, very shockingly, they're still performing terrible. I mean, they're pitching. The Phillies, we thought the Phillies starting pitcher was bad to start the year. The Cardinals starting pitching has been god awful, among one of the worst rotations in all of baseball. So, so that's right. So look at that right there. Okay, so you look at so two things with the Goldschmidt thing, right? I'll touch on the Goldschmidt thing right now, then. So, all right, so put Aaron Nola aside, for a second, because that's a separate deal from the Goldschmidt, right? That's obviously focused on all the offense. Two things with the Paul Goldschmidt trade, right? A potential Paul Goldschmidt trade, right? One, you'd have to give up either Mick Abel or Griff McCary in that deal, 100%. The Cardinals are 100% going to want starting pitching. That's all they're going to want pitching, which, let's face it, the Phillies don't have a lot of starting pitching depth in their minors besides the top three, right, guys? And obviously, Painter's untouchable. Mick Abel and Griff McCary, it would be up. It would have to be one of those two if you're trading for a reigning MVP. So that's just the way it would be. Now, looking at my flashlight was on my phone. So looking at that, right? With Goldschmidt, you would have to give up one of our top pitching prospects, one of the top three, and it would be either Abel or McCary in that deal, and plus other stuff. You'd have to give up at least another player or two in that deal as well. But then also on the flip side of it, which I was watching watching pregame live before the Phillies game here tonight, which is I think why it's kind of not being really talked about out loud with the Phillies, in terms of the trade deadline right now, because Rhys Hoskins being back in the clubhouse right now, the big thing with that is Rhys Hoskins, right? Because the Phillies trade for Paul Goldschmidt, that is going to the day that would possibly happen, right? In July, right? So in 2 weeks from now, if that deal were to go through, that would tell Rhys Hoskins on that day that this is your last year as a Philadelphia Philly, because you're not coming back next year. If they get Paul Goldschmidt, who's signed for another year, he's got another year of control. So you'd be getting Goldschmidt for this year and next year. Then Rhys would not be able to come back. Rhys would not be able to come back next year. And I actually saw Mitch Williams the other day was talking about this on the A2D family show as well. That's what he was saying. If the Phillies were to trade for Paul Goldschmidt, then Reese, you're signaling to Reese that you're not coming back. And that could be a thing that could really affect the clubhouse. And like, that's the thing, right? Like we've seen the Phillies, like obviously last postseason, we saw how good a clubhouse and good of a culture that the Phillies do have. And like, we just didn't see it for most of the regular season. I mean, I think we've really, like, nobody really knew how tight these guys were and how close and connected these guys were with each other. So, yeah, like, so like that was like something that we were waiting for all season long to see. And we finally did in the postseason. Right. So that's like, knowing that the Phillies have the culture, they have the right guys, and they have the right guys, and Reese is such a big part of that. And like, really, like, I think I underestimated like how important Reese was. I think everybody did going into this season. Like once Reese got hurt in spring training, like especially for the first month or two of the season, like we saw how much of a hole in the lineup that Reese, missing Reese actually left for the Phillies lineup. Like having him out of the lineup, like it was a huge blow to the Phillies. And luckily Cody Clemens has been able to fill in pretty admirably so far, especially on the defensive side of the ball for the Phillies, at first base. That's been they haven't really, like, with Cody Clemens playing as well as he has now. Derek Hall is going to come back now. So like, okay, you have some depth now. And obviously with Alec Boehm getting switched out at first as well, in some games, like, okay, you have a lot of depth now at first. So like, do they need to trade for a Paul Goldschmidt? No. Like, is that at the top of their priority right now? I don't believe it is. And, and I'm going to get into with the reason why the bullpen is a little bit later on, but like right now with the Phillies offense, like the Phillies offense is set right now, right? Like right now tonight, like that's our offense, like tonight, like that, like we're pretty set. So when you have us all healthy, like our offense can beat anybody when they're healthy and they're playing well, right? Like that I'll take that lineup against anybody on any given day. Like we can beat any team on any given day with that lineup that we have tonight. Now, adding Paul Goldschmidt to that lineup would probably make us, in my opinion, would give the Phillies the best lineup in the National League. If they were to get Paul Goldschmidt, yeah, you put Goldschmidt in the middle of that lineup with Price and Trey Turner and Nick Castellanos and Kyle Schwarber and JT Realmuto, and I'm going to throw up just saying all these names on one team together in the same lineup. Like, yes, that's like, okay, if that's now, of course, the question would be, would the Phillies be willing to give up one of their top pitching prospects to get Goldschmidt? And that's a question that really, I'm just not really sure that the Phillies are going to want to do because, right, great point there, Tim. Paul Goldschmidt is 35. Yes, he'll be 36 next year. And obviously Reese is only 30. So Reese is 6 years younger than Paul Goldschmidt. That's obviously a big difference in age right there. But, when you're talking about Paul Goldschmidt, a guy that has won multiple Gold Gloves, a guy that is the reigning National League MVP, the Phillies are in win now mode. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and really, like Rhys Hoskins being 30-year-old for first baseman, getting signed for, if the Phillies were to have to sign Rhys Hoskins for next year, right, it would have to be in the range of, I mean, look at what Jose Abreu got from the Houston Astros this past season, right? Like it was 3 years, $60 million. Like I think Reese is going to want somewhere around there, but like he's going to want around 20. I know that. Like that's definitely what they're going to want for him. Like I would try and get that if I'm him too. But obviously the Phillies are not going to do anywhere close to 20 million for Rhys Hoskins. And when you consider Paul Goldschmidt is making like under 15 million or something like that for next year for the Phillies, like that's a number that, we can live with for 1 year of Paul Goldschmidt. And like, especially if, and Paul Goldschmidt is not the problem right now in St. Louis at all. Like he's still hitting well. He's not doing his MVP numbers the start that he had last year, but like Paul Goldschmidt's still Paul Goldschmidt, right? Like that's a guy that if you were to add to our lineup would just be ridiculous. Right. But at the same time, like it's just, if you're going to give up one of those top pitching prospects, Mick Abel or Griff McCary, that we've heard so much about for the last couple of years. But if, and this is one other thing I'll say on this is the last thing I'll say on the Paul Goldschmidt thing for now. If you're willing to trade Mick Abel or Griff McCary for Paul Goldschmidt, then really that just shows how much the Phillies really believe in those guys from the first place. And that will really concern me more if we were willing to do that, because that tells me once again that the Phillies are having a big problem in developing pitching down in their minors, which they've had for how long now? I mean, yeah, how long have they had a problem with this? I mean, it's been over a decade. And if they were willing to trade one of those top 2 prospects, that's going to say a lot more about the Phillies and their development, in terms of their player development than anything. So that would tell me a lot right there if the Phillies were willing to do that. And I just don't think they're going to be willing to do that at this point, especially with Aaron Nola being on the trade block. Essentially, it could be, but essentially, he's going to be a free agent going into off. The odds of losing Aaron Nola are 50-50 at this point for me with the Phillies right now. I mean, he's 50-50 at this point for the Phillies right now. So when your odds are only 50-50, then you're going to have to look into moves like this, to see if you can really improve your team to try and win a World Series while you have Aaron Nola on the team, right? So, if they're going to keep Aaron Nola, which I believe they will, then they absolutely could look at the Paul Goldschmidt trade, because that would be a move, right? That's to try and win a World Series this year. And then hopefully if they sign Aaron Nola back next year, then, okay, going forward, you have Paul Goldschmidt for another year. And yes, you have one of the best lineups in baseball for another year to try and go win another World Series next year as well. So it's going to be this trade deadline is going to be very, very interesting for the Phillies. They could go in the direction of offense like that for a guy like Paul Goldschmidt, or they can go in the direction for bullpen help for pitching. And to be honest with you, the pitching is really I'm still concerned with the Phillies and their pitching, because right now, just we still don't have a 5th starter. There's still no news on when we expect to have a 5th starter. So we're probably going to be rocking with the bullpen game. Now, the one thing I will say for the Phillies in terms of some pitching development, speaking of the top prospects there, Andrew Painter, finally getting some news on Andrew Painter this week. Today I was reading. He will be, he just made a bullpen. He just did a bullpen session. The next thing he'll be doing is live batting practice BP against live hitting. And then he'll work his way into doing, the rehab starts. So from what the Phillies say, they expect Painter to hopefully be able to come back in August. Now, that obviously makes it very interesting, because the trade deadline is, right at the end of July there. So that's going to be very telling. If Painter's ready to come back, and that's the conversation we'll definitely have at that point too, is and I'll put that question out there now, do you think would bringing Painter up in August, when we're in the middle of a, division race, potentially definitely will be with the Braves, are we going to want to put the guy who's been hurt for most of the year into a spot like that and expect him to really get his feet under him going into September and October for the postseason? That's not the best. That's not obviously an ideal situation for Andrew Painter. So the Phillies are definitely going to have to look at adding pitching help. And I think that's why, because yes, do we all want Andrew Painter to be there? Yes, of course we do. From what they're talking about, the way they talk about Andrew Painter, I mean, this is they're giving out this guy can be, Justin Verlander type, Max Scherzer type guy. That's what they're talking about. That's where they think this guy, the ceiling this guy could have. So when you're talking about a guy like that, obviously, yes, if he's that good, yeah, you're when he's ready to go, he should be able to pitch, right? No matter, regardless if he's, 20 years old or not. Especially when you look at teams like the Braves and the Dodgers that always bring up these young guys. And the Dodgers, I forget the guy's name, but they just brought up this another their 13th overall prospect through 6 no-hit innings in his first start. That's what I was just talking about with Ralph, right before the show. I'm just these teams, and of course, you look at the Rays too, teams that are able to find these pitching prospects, these pitching, able to find pitchers like this and develop them. That's really what sets good organizations apart from any other organization, is the player development. And the Phillies have absolutely sucked with player development for the last decade, right? It's been well documented for how bad, especially the Matt Klentak years. God, I mean, oh my God, how awful those years were. And I mean, how bad the Phillies were for those years, and what prospects did we produce? Yes, it's a very, 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 very little list. So regardless of all that, looking now into the trade deadline, the Phillies are going to have to add the pitching, right? Obviously, with the way that the starting pitching has turned it around here over these last 2 weeks, Phillies are 13-4 in their last 17 games. So obviously, and the starting pitching has been the absolute main reason why for that. Of course, the Phillies, yes, Schwarber's getting going. The offense like Nick, everybody, Bryson Stott, everybody's hitting. But with the way that Ranger Suarez and Taijuan Walker have been pitching over these last couple weeks, has been really remarkable. And it's something that we really need to focus on and talk about these guys a little more because, going into the season, obviously with like Taijuan Walker, like obviously was kind of a surprise signing to going in 4 years, $72 million. I think a lot of people were a little surprised that we did that. But, he's been absolutely fantastic over his last 4 starts. And with Ranger Suarez going in tonight, let's see. Let me see here. Okay. You know what? Let me see. Did we score? No, bottom of third. Okay. Brady Marsh third there. Okay. 1 on third. Okay, good. All right. So the Phillies have a man on third here, threatening a little bit. So I will keep everyone keep me updated on that. Trey Turner grounds out. Yeah, of course he does. God, Trey, come on, bro. I'm wearing a shirt, and that's what he does. Great. All right. Well, looks like is Bryce up right now, or Nick's up right now. Okay, so I'll keep an eye on that for right now. Yeah. Well. Okay. So I think really, and also, all right. So going into this, so just looking at the Phillies right now, at this game live right now, right? Like going against Spencer Strider, who's really struggled over his lis couple starts. Over his last 3 starts, he has an ERA of 9. And actually throughout for this season, like obviously the big thing with Spencer Strider, his biggest thing is his strikeouts, right? Like he's just got overpowering stuff, leads the league in strikeouts right now by a wide margin, like by like 25, like more than Ohtani, I think. Like Ohtani's like the next closest, and he's like 25 behind him. So, and that's before Strider obviously pitches tonight. So hopefully he won't add too much to that total. But yeah, with the way that Strider's been pitching though, and obviously we saw it last year, like if you can get Spencer Strider to throw a lot of pitches, that's when he can get a little flustered. And you're looking at the Braves too right now. Like really with the Braves, like I'm looking at the Braves and the Phillies right now. Obviously 2 teams that are built completely different, right? Braves have developed and drafted and signed most of their core guys that they've developed themselves, and the Phillies have gone out and signed a lot of these guys, from other teams, of course. But you're looking at the Braves right now, like over the last, like the Braves are obviously hot. I said the Phillies are 13-4, the Braves are 14-5 in their last 19 right now. So, and they're on a 6-game winning streak too. But the thing with the Braves though, like they have not really played a lot of difficult, games right now. So, the Braves, right now, they have the 20th toughest schedule in the league. The Phillies have the 9th toughest. And then you look at the Marlins right now, who have been absolutely red hot. Or it's still in second place right now. They actually have the 3rd easiest schedule in MLB so far this year. So, and like the Braves, like over those last 19 games, only 3 of those games, 1 series came against a team with a winning record. So the Braves over the course of that time, like that's what the Braves do though, right? Like, especially over this Rockies series, they've scored like 56 runs over the last 4 games. It was over that 4-game sweep of the Rockies. It was like absolutely ridiculous. They had the 14th spot on Sunday. So the Braves are hitting the cover off the ball right now. Like, and their whole team is absolutely hot. But the thing with the difference between with Spencer Strider going and Ranger Suarez, like with Spencer Strider going, his big weakness is if you get him to throw a lot of pitches, he's going to get wild. And like the Phillies obviously can take advantage of that. And the Phillies, but we look at the Phillies though, the Phillies, one of their biggest weak spots in terms of their approach at the plate is their plate discipline, right? Like sometimes the Phillies are an aggressive team, right? Like you look at guys like Nick and Schwarber, like they're going to be aggressive, right? The biggest key to the game tonight, I think the rest of the way going into, for the rest of this game, the Phillies are going to have to be patient at the plate. Like they can't get themselves into 0-2 counts early, which I've seen a little bit every time I looked at my phone. They're in an 0-2, 1-2 count. So that's definitely not the recipe for success right now against Spencer Strider. You want to get ahead of him big time. Like that's what the Phillies really got to focus on going on in the rest of this game. Get ahead of Spencer Strider and then look for his fastball when he's behind in the count. And that is when you're going to be able to take advantage. Obviously, we don't have Rhys Hoskins, like I said, to bat spike, the entire systemic park into an earthquake. But hopefully, we're able to take advantage with Spencer Strider obviously the last time he came here, didn't go so well for him. And he's obviously pitched very well against the Phillies in his career, but over his last 2 starts to the Phillies against the Phillies, his ERA is over 6. So let's hope the Phillies can do, let's see. Did they get strikes out swinging? Well, see, that is not the recipe for success right there. That's unfortunate. Damn. Okay. Well, that's all right. Top 4, 0-0. Well, the good thing is Ranger Suarez only got 41 pitches going into the 4th inning right now. So Ranger looks like he is continuing to do his thing again as well. Phillies only got 3 hits so far. Schwarber, Bryce, and Brandon Marsh with a double there. So good to see Brandon Marsh. Hopefully Brandon Marsh can get it going. The way Brandon Marsh started the year, I mean, he was on an absolute tear to start this year, and has really quieted down over the last probably 3 to 4 weeks. But when you put a guy like Brandon Marsh, if you can get a Brandon Marsh to hit around 275, 280 in the 9-hole, really not much more you can ask for than that, right? So if Brandon Marsh can get it going out of the 9-hole and just hold it down there with like Cody Clemens and Alec Boehm down there in the last 3 spots, I mean, Brandon Marsh and Alec Boehm batting in the 7 and 9 spots in your lineup, I mean, that's just absolutely ridiculous that those guys are on. I mean, what they can do, if they're able to do that, we can beat pretty much any team. But, we're going against Spencer Strider tonight. So 0-0 game right now. Hey, I think also interested in Suki. I'm not sure. Do you know who Suki is? Tim, I'm not sure who that is, but that's okay. Pitching is very important though. So yeah, like I said, that's why we're talking, that's why the Phillies have got to focus on the pitching right now, going into the trade deadline. But yeah, just looking right now at what hold on, give me 1 sec. Let me pull the thing up here. Give me 1 second. Okay. All right. Let's see here. Yeah, so like I said, Strider obviously not doing too well, giving up 13 runs in 9 innings over his last 2 starts. So and he really like he's got his ERA over the last 3 weeks is over 6, and his ERA for the season is over 4 right now. So Spencer Strider really hasn't been a guy that's really impressed like me in terms of like, okay, he's one of like, obviously his strikeout stuff is absolutely nasty, but this is a guy that we have gotten to, in the biggest moments. So, and that's the thing with the Braves too. Like you look at like who they've played, like, and they played a lot of home games too. Like they're not playing a lot of like hard competition right now. It always seems to be that way for the Braves, but obviously they've won the World Series 2 years ago. They're a team that definitely knows how to win in the biggest moments. Like, but going into this series and going into the rest of the season right now, obviously the way the Phillies have dug themselves a hole tonight, not tonight, to start the season, but the way the Phillies are starting to hit now and the way that the Phillies are starting to pitch, that's what I want to know. That's my big thing this week. Like, obviously we're 0-0 right now. It's going to be a low scoring game tonight. That, we're all expecting that. If Ranger and Spencer pitch the way they expect to do, it's going to be a good old fashioned pitcher's duel tonight. Right. But really the thing I really want to know this week, like, say the Phillies, like if we win this series from the Braves this week, are you convinced that the Phillies are going to beat the Braves for the National League East this week? I mean, this season. Gosh, there we go. Long day at work today. Sorry, guys. But yeah, do you guys think that the Phillies, like, if we sweep this series, or if we even if we win the series against the Braves this week, and regardless of what we do against the Mets, which we really need to beat them because considering what they've done and what they've done to us recently. So, but that'll be for next time. But yeah, like if the Phillies are able to beat the Braves this week, like I want to say I do want to say, and I will say, screw it. I will say it. I am definitely going to agree with this. I believe that if the Phillies sweep the Braves or even beat the Braves this week, even if they don't beat the Braves, even if they don't beat them this week, I still think the Phillies have a chance to catch the Braves in the NL East this year. Because like I said before, like the Phillies are not just going to sit here with the team that they have now going into that trade deadline and expect the Phillies not to do anything. Like I know Dave is thinking right now ahead with, like I said, with the Aaron Nola situation, like with what Aaron Nola is going through. If they really don't expect him to be back next year, then yes, expect it expect a trade like the Paul Goldschmidt one, because I think that you would rather try and win a World Series this year while you have him than next year when you don't, right? Because there's no guarantee that you're going to be able to replace the quality and caliber of Aaron Nola. Now, regardless of what everyone thinks of him, he's still a pretty good pitcher. So is he an ace? Like, no. And is he going to be paid like an ace? Probably, but it definitely won't be by the Phillies, I think, at this point, because we would have done that already if we wanted to do that. So, and I think, going forward here, Aaron Nola is really going to have to show a lot. Thanks a lot, Tim. You as well, bud. Yeah, so the Phillies are really going to have to show me that they're interested in trying to win a World Series, not just this year, but going forward. And I think the best way to do that is to keep Aaron Nola this year and look and Goldschmidt. I'm not, if you're really not expecting that, this is the bottom line with it, right? If you're not expecting Aaron Nola to come back next year, then you can't trade McAble or Griff McCary for Goldschmidt at this point, right? Like, because if you really believe in those top three guys, in Painter, Abel, and McCary, like the way that they've talked about for the last couple of years that they've been here, all three of those guys, right? Like, we've heard it all about these three guys from the last 2 years, that they're the future of the organization at the top, top three starters, homegrown guys who are going to grow together and, be the face of the Phillies, rotation going forward, So, that's obviously a wonderful dream and a wonderful, projection to have. But the odds of all three of those guys actually being here and actually doing that is further from reality than we probably realize. So I think odds are probably one of them is not going to be here. And you just have to really have to be certain that if you add Paul Goldschmidt, if you were to, and this is saying we could get a guy like Paul Goldschmidt and expect him to still beat Paul Goldschmidt at his age, you really got to bank on the fact that he is actually going to be that guy. And obviously, if you add him to that lineup, right, we would have the best lineup in the National League, no question, in my opinion. Just look at that lineup from top to bottom. There's not going to be really one weakness in that lineup. So that's the thing. Do you want to have if you want to have the best lineup in the league, then sure, go for it. That's the move that you would make. But you could be sacrificing for the future. And really, the Phillies, the future, and for the Phillies, their future is now, right? The Phillies, have signed all these guys. Their window to win is really the next 3 years. That's really the best case scenario for the Phillies. Next 3, maybe even 5. It's really hard to maintain that, obviously, but really for the next 2 years, 3 years, that's the Phillies' window. That's going to be their best window with when all these guys that are still in their prime, right? While Schwarber, Trey, Bryce, and, Nick, all these guys will be in their prime for the next 3 years, and then they're going to start getting older. So, you really got to do this now, and you really got to maximize the talent that's on the field right now for the Phillies. Yes, Goldschmidt would be that guy for that, but at the same time, really, if you really do believe in these guys they do and they supposedly do, and Abel and Painter, and obviously Painter, I'll leave Painter out of it, he's not going anywhere. But if you truly believe that Abel and McCary could be future guys for this rotation, especially if you're looking at these guys at top line starter guys for the rotation, especially for when Wheeler and Nola were to leave, obviously, that's a lot to bank on with not any anything to go on, because none of them have pitched at the major league level yet. So it would have, all of them would have to be up here and start pitching, and also start pitching well pretty quickly for them to really believe that and really, go forward with them. So, but at some point they got to come up, right? At some point, Nick Abel and Griff McCary, I've talked about for the last couple of weeks now, we need to get one of these guys up here. You need to get them up now so they can start getting the experience now going into later in the season, especially with the Phillies, when you're a team that is expecting to play in October yearly now, that the Phillies are expecting to do, you now have to get them in position, these young guys, especially these young guys, in position to be ready for October, because it's a whole other ball game when you get to play. It's a playoff baseball, we were reminded of last year, is a completely different set of game of baseball than the regular season. It completely is. So that's a situation. Obviously, you need these guys to be up and be comfortable at the major league level, especially with how young they are, before you would like convince me to put them in a postseason game. Like at this point, like, yeah, I wouldn't want any of those guys really going into a postseason game at this point because I haven't seen any of them. They need to have the experience at the major league level. And why the Phillies continue to wait at this point is beyond me, because I think you would want to see one of these guys right now at the major league level, right? Especially if you're thinking about trading one, like another, like you would want to bring these guys up so you can start seeing how they are. Like, but obviously on the flip side, like if they start doing bad, then tanks their value. So you also don't want to do that too. But at some point, you're going to have to pull the plug on. I mean, not pull the plug. You're just going to have to take the kids' gloves off and just let these guys go out and play. Like, you just got to be able to have these guys come up and start pitching and start getting the experience at the major league level. So until that happens, I mean, like, it's really going to be interesting to see the Phillies at this point where they go at the trade deadline. I mean, like I said, they can go one of those two ways, but looking at it now, really with the Phillies, like you got to add more at the top of that bullpen right now, because with what we're getting at the top of the bullpen, obviously on this win streak, yes, the Phillies have pitched pretty damn well. Like the bullpen game against the Oakland A's, got to give them up to the bullpen. They pitched very, very well that game, top to bottom. I think everybody in the bullpen pitched besides Dylan Covey. Thank goodness. And that's why they probably ended up winning. So why Dylan Covey's still in the Phillies, I have no idea. But if he even goes on the mound in this Braves series, I'm going to lose my absolute mind. So I really hope we don't see him at all this week, against the Braves. But because we know how that went last time when he was going against Spencer Strider. And the last time, that Sunday massacre, that first inning massacre that they ensued on us down in Atlanta. But so when you have a guy like Dylan Covey still on the team, right? Like, and Jeff Hoffman had his first save, good for him. But like, and Yunus Marte was terrible. Christopher Sanchez actually pitched very well for the Phillies. He's actually the only guy to actually get a win from the fifth starter spot since April. So that's pretty good. That's pretty good. So he's won. The Phillies have won the last two games that he's pitched in for us. So he got that liner off the hand in the Oakland game. He was pitching really well that game too before he got out. But sounds like he's fine. So I guess he'll be making the start, I guess, in the next against the Mets. It'll be against the Mets in the Mets series because we got Aaron Nola and Taijuan Walker the next two nights. So we got the big guns this series, which is great. Really, obviously, the Aaron Nola game tomorrow. I mean, that's going to be the one that's going to obviously decide the series tomorrow. And that's just the guy the Phillies want on the mound, don't they? So, yeah, with Aaron Nola tomorrow, right? It's God only knows what that guy's going to do. It's like he's either going to pitch really well or blow it in the fourth or fifth inning like he always does. And also Aaron Nola, fun fact for him, he's got 11 straight games where he's given up a home run. He only needs one more to tie Randy Wolf, the Wolfpack legend, for most consecutive starts to give up a home run as a Philly. So hopefully he doesn't do that, but obviously against the Braves, that's not looking great. Definitely not a great matchup for Aaron Nola tomorrow night, but he's had some success against the Braves in his career. It's very 500, which is very Aaron Nola. So Aaron Nola is obviously going to be the deciding factor for this Braves series. Because I fully expect with Ranger Suarez, the way he's pitching tonight right now, and even Taijuan Walker, another guy that, you look at Ranger, obviously Taijuan Walker pitches World Baseball Classic, right? So very delayed getting to the Phillies, very delayed getting into the Phillies clubhouse, getting acclimated, and obviously having to go pitch in the World Baseball Classic and have, basically be your first games of the season, be games that really, really matter. That's awesome. And that's great for a guy, but with the way that, and Taijuan pitched really well in the World Baseball Classic too, but when he got to the Phillies, he did not pitch that well to start the season at all. I mean, his ERA was absolutely abysmal, but with the way that Taijuan Walker is really turning around, 7-3, Phillies have won his last four starts. His ERA has dropped down to 4.6 now, but I mean, from his first couple starts, I mean that his ERA was 11 or 10 or 11 at that point. So he's really, really, really turned it around, and he's really, really improving. So, we're getting some spam comments here. Nice. Okay, What? Yeah, it's French. Oh, well, I don't know if anybody speaks that language, but I sure don't. So that's okay, though. I have no idea what that is. But anyway, so yeah, but with the Phillies, yeah, like with Ranger Suarez and Taijuan Walker, right? Like with the way that these two guys have pitched over the last couple of weeks, like going forward, like there's no two guys on the Phillies right now that are more important than those two, because with Wheeler and Nola, like you expect those guys to be your two best pitchers, your aces, right? But for the Phillies, like really, like if they're gonna really avoid these, those losing streaks, those 5-game losing streaks, and really avoid going into those ruts, like the starting pitching is really what's going to have to keep those games close when the offense is not performing, obviously, right? And when you have Ranger Suarez and Taijuan Walker consistently going out there and giving you 6 innings, 7 innings, Taijuan Walker gave 8 innings, against the that in the Oakland game, like when you're giving those kind of performances, like that's when your team can go out there every single night and believe that they have like that mentally, like that completely changes the outlook for the Phillies. Like when these guys are pitching well, because when you have 4 guys that can go out there, like obviously we don't have a 5th still, but when the Phillies, like if they have that top 4, and that's a pretty damn good top 4 right there with Wheeler, Nola, Ranger. Well, I'll put right now Wheeler, Ranger, Nola, and Walker as your top 4. That's darn good right there, right? Like that, we can go up against anybody with that top 4 when they're playing the way when they play the way they're supposed to play. So with Ranger Suarez and Taijuan Walker going forward right now with this season, like if they're able to continue to pitch like this, the Phillies are going to be able to eliminate themselves from going on those type of losing streaks, right? Like this is like what we need to do so we can go on these winning streaks, like you see when the Braves and the Dodgers, like all these teams that go on, like the starting pitching is got to lead the way, because the offense, obviously, they're going to hit like we're seeing right now. Like, we're not seeing it tonight. I would like to see it sooner than later, still 0-0. But the way that the Phillies are going to go where the offense is going to carry the Phillies to the promised land if we go there, right? But the pitching is what's really, really, really going to have to get them there, right? The pitching is going to have to get them there, and the offense is going to have to, it's going to have to take them over the top, right? Like that's how it's going to have to go. The Phillies pitching is going to have to get them there, and the offense is going to have to take them all the way home. Like that's the way the Phillies are going to have to win the World Series this year. So when you have those, those 4 guys going the way they're going right now, yeah, we can go on these win streaks and we can get hopefully a little more consistency and catch up to the Braves. And obviously it starts with this series. If we're able to sweep the Braves this series, I think we're only going to be 5.5 games back of the Braves, right? I think we're 8.5 going into this series. If, somebody correct me if I'm wrong there. But yeah, we're about like 8.5 out or 8 games out right now, right? So yeah, we'd only be about 5.5 games back of the Braves. And going into the trade deadline in a couple weeks. Yeah, that's a position the Phillies want to be. Like you can't ask for more than that at the Phillies if they go into the All-Star break and they're only like, a couple games back of the Braves. I mean, can't ask for more than that. And that's a really realistic, it's really realistic because the Braves, the way their schedule is going to get, their schedule is going to get tough here coming up. Phillies, on the other hand, let's look ahead real quick. Obviously with the Mets, now we know that should be a series that we win next week, right? I mean, not next week, next going into this weekend, but the Phillies are really going to have to exercise their demons from for whatever reason. Why we can't beat the Mets is absolutely beyond me from what I used to grow up, from what I grew up in, for what we used to do to the Mets back in the glory days, when all the boys were there, back in the late 2000s, early 2000s there. But going into the next, like this series and next series, Braves and the Mets, the Phillies, like I think this is the most important stretch. I mean, this is the most important stretch probably for the Phillies season until we get later on in the year, like because the ability to go in and hopefully, you have to win the series against the Braves, obviously, right? You have to win 2 of 3. But if you're able to sweep the Braves and then be able to just put the absolute nail in the coffin for the Mets season, if you're able to sweep the Mets, then you're right back at the forefront of the division right now. And really, I mean, who wouldn't? And everybody, I think, would realize, okay, the Phillies now are not only officially back, but are 100% players again to go to the World Series. So, and that's absolutely where they will be at the end of the season. But Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. Obviously, the trade deadline. I can't wait for the trade deadline because, I mean, like I said, like it is going to be fascinating to see where what the Phillies are willing to gamble with. If they're willing to gamble with their future a little bit and try and go after Paul Goldschmidt, then that really tells you that okay, they're going all in for the World Series this year. Then, like they got that taste. Obviously, they got there last year. They got a taste of it. If you're going in for like a Goldschmidt or somebody like that, even like a trade for like a Shane Bieber or somebody like that from the Guardians, like that would tell me more like okay, like they're just they're just going all in right now, and next year they'll worry about after the season, right? Like because. And that would also tell me, hopefully, if they were, willing to do that, then okay, like that means if they were to trade for Goldschmidt, then that means Painter's pitching this year. I'll tell you that right now. That means like they fully expect Painter to come up probably in August, and eventually take over that fifth spot. I mean, I don't think it's ideal to start him in August. Like I said, I would like to see him get a little more experience. Not just be thrown in, but hey, some guys are built better that way and perform better that way when they're thrown into the spotlight like that and thrown into the fire like that. So hopefully he could be one of those guys because, we're going to need him to be if we're not going to make a move. Like if the Phillies don't make a move for pitching, then obviously that tells us that Painter's coming because like Abel McCary, like, yes, great prospects, sure, but they're not on the level that Andrew Painter's on, supposedly. So, and from everything I've read, everything I've watched from Andrew Painter, like this guy's the real deal. So like, he's a guy that, you should expect to come up like, and not have to go through hopefully not have to go through that rookie wall and, those growing pains right away. Because this guy is going to be healthy and throw 98 and be able to come up and just do what he does. So, that would be great to see. And that's going to be very telling to see what the Phillies, obviously with Andrew Painter, if he is going to come up and he does get the experience, then I think the Phillies obviously want to see him because he potentially could be taking over for Aaron Nola next year, right? Like that would be the expected, thing, because if you're letting Aaron Nola go next year, then Painter would have to take over for him. Obviously they would bring in another free agent pitcher, but like you're expecting to bring in a free agent pitcher and also have Painter counteract, the loss of an Aaron Nola. So you would also have to be, I would like to see a little more of him. I would like to see any of him this year, which would be absolutely fantastic. But hopefully, hopefully we can see him soon. So I only got 3 minutes left, which once again, I get right down to the wire here. And it's, geez, man, that is crazy. So let me get into my fantasy starts and sits of the week. Now he's not starting tonight against the Phillies, but tomorrow night and for this week, Eddie Rosario right now on the Braves. I'll stay with starting off with this series right now. He is one of the hottest hitters in all baseball right now. He is gunning for that June Player of the Month from Schwarber right now. I'll tell you that because he's got 4 home runs. He's homered in 4 straight games, hit 2 on this past Sunday. He doesn't bat against lefties. So over the next 2 games, Aaron Nola, Taijuan Walker, if anybody's going to do damage against the Phillies, it's probably going to be this guy. So that's definitely a guy like, hey, like, the Braves are going to score something against Aaron Nola. And, the Braves tomorrow night is probably going to be one of those games where it's a high scoring game at some point. Like that's a guy to definitely look at. And going into and another guy too, also right now, starting to get hot again too, Bo Bichette right now on the Toronto Blue Jays. Hasn't really been doing too great. Really went through a rough patch over the last 2 weeks, but over the last week, batting .321 over the last week. He is going to start hitting. I have a feeling he's going to really start hitting for power again right now. And of course, I have to spotlight one guy in particular right now, who I can't believe at this point, June 20th, that we're talking about a guy still batting .400. And actually, we're not talking about it right now because really not a lot of people are talking about it right now. But Luis Suarez back up to .400 on the season right now. Another 5-hit game. He had 2 5-hit games in the span of 3 days. He's got 3 5-hit games this month. He's only the 4th guy like in the last 50 years or something like that to do that in a calendar month. Guys, what Luis Suarez is doing this year, I got to talk about it every week at the end of the show. I'm always going to end with Luis Suarez because as long as this guy is going to be batting around .400, this needs to be talked about because what this guy is doing right now it's hard to even comprehend how difficult it is to hit .400 in a season. Is just absolutely I mean, it's one of those records. It's like basically a 56-game hit streak. I mean, it's the same kind of thing. It's like just a record that it's just something that you don't expect to ever, like, you'll never expect to see. Like, you should never, ever expect to see it. But the fact that he is the latest now in a season since 1984 now to be batting 400 at this point. So, like, it's absolutely incredible for him. Pretty much start him every week and start him every day, because all the dude is going to get hits for you. So that will finish me up tonight. That was like 3 minutes of like absolute like that. So let's go Phillies. Hopefully as soon as I get off, we can start scoring. So that's probably why. They're probably just waiting for me to be done, because then they can just start scoring for me. So, just they want to. I got to be the good luck charm. So, hey, guys, I'm willing to do it for you guys. So thank you guys for joining me on the Strike Zone again tonight. Let's go Phillies. Hope you guys have a great week, and I will see you next time on the Strike Zone. See you guys.